Welcome to JGTCR, I'm Cope, and today we are tuning the Aston Martin DB5. Let's get into it. The DB5 is a very old car and handles as such, but it does well for its age. It does not have a lot of power, but the power it does have, it puts to the ground reasonably well. Being that this is an old school vehicle, the suspension is spongy and a bit loose, so turning sharply can cause the tail end to break loose and induce a light drift. This can be managed by easing off, regaining traction and getting back into it, or the more fun way is to power through it by keeping the foot planted to the floor. The drifts themselves are considerably stable as long as we don't get too much angle. Under brakes, this Aston Martin is reasonable as long as it's done in a straight line. Braking and turning can cause slides, and more often than not, they are not the good kind, so proceed with caution. Let's get to the finish line and collect our time. 8 minutes 29.2 seconds. And now the race tune. The DB5 was in desperate need of downforce. Unfortunately, the only aero parts available is a rear wing. Fortunately, it was enough to stabilize the rear end enough to make the vehicle manageable. Suspension-wise, our body height adjustment is dipped at the nose, keeping the tail high. This is a way to slightly artificially reproduce the effects of downforce delivered by front aero parts. If this was insufficient, the next move would have been to add ballast over the front wheels. Our differential settings are cranked all the way to the max, as the DB5 seems to handle it rather well. Let's test the tune out on the circuit. After being completely modified and tuned, the Aston Martin DB5 has undergone an amazing transformation. Like a beautiful streamlined butterfly, this vehicle has emerged from its cocoon, an old classic looking car with a new age feel. And yes, that rear wing looks ugly, but it gives us much needed downforce and by extension, traction. The amount of power being delivered to the rear wheels has more than doubled, but somehow the DB5 manages to handle it perfectly. The tail end does break loose from time to time, but generally speaking, the traction is awesome. The power delivery itself is solid, a touch lazy, but that definitely helps with traction. The handling is a world apart from factory trim. It is extremely responsive and agile. The brakes also work very well, however, the tail can slide when heavy braking. Let's collect our time. 6 minutes 38.4 seconds. Outstanding. And now it's time for the drift tune. The changes for the DB5 drift tune are few but effective. Our body height adjustment was made lower at the rear than the front, creating a squatting stance. The rear suspension was made slightly softer by adjusting the dampening ratio, both compression and expansion. We also maximized the rear camber angle for more push power and directional drift. The differential saw an adjustment to acceleration sensitivity. This was reduced to 30 points due to the aggressive nature of power delivery. We also increased rear downforce to 200, and finally we added ballast of 25 points at a ballast positioning of -25 over the front wheels. This gives us better steering control and also creates a pendulum effect when we are drifting. Now let's head out to Suzuka and watch it work. There's just something about these old Aston Martin chassis that lend themselves perfectly for drift applications, and the Aston Martin DB5 is absolutely no exception. No matter what kind of drift style is thrown at this thing, it's more than happy to comply. Be it bouncing off the limiter in full send mode or gracefully gliding on air with throttle modulation, the DB5 has you covered. It is astounding how much front end control we have, considering there is no front aero downforce at all. Any adjustment to line or angle is easily achieved in the blink of an eye. The power delivery, while peaky in nature, is rarely so extreme that it spins the car out. And with the killer combo of incredible handling and awesome power, the Aston Martin DB5 is hot to trot in any online drift lobby. It is more than capable of keeping up with the crowd and avoiding any hazards we may find along the way. At first glance and on the surface, the Aston Martin DB5 may not seem like it has much to offer, but beneath the surface lies an untapped resource of awesomeness. In factory trim, the DB5 is quite impressive given its age. The package is humble, but it does perform above its class. When completely modified and tuned, it bursts onto the scene as if it were an entirely new vehicle. Its power and handling have improved tenfold. In this iteration, it outperforms many of the modern sports cars by a country mile. And when it comes to drifting, this old classic is a natural, effortlessly snaking its way through turns, bellowing smoke from the rear, and dialing in more angle than many of the go-to drift cars. The Aston Martin DB5 is a must-have vehicle and cannot be recommended highly enough. And that's all we have for you today, so until next time, keep racing!